In this video, I'll be talking about my 33 on 33 plein air painting project from 2013, recounting days 1 to 6. In 2013, at the break of dawn on May 25th, I hit the road, specifically Prince Edward County's Highway 33, aka the King's Highway, aka Loyalist Parkway, aka Main Street, for that year's big summer art project. Beginning at the Murray Canal at the northwest end of PEC near Trenton, I headed out early each day, gradually making my way east along 33, creating one 20-inch by 20-inch oil painting each day for 33 days. This marathon of sorts concluded on June 26th at the Glenora Ferry Dock, and all 34 paintings were then shown at the Blizzamax Gallery later in June. Each day that I set out, I had no idea what I was going to paint. Rather, I parked in a location that I thought would suit my needs, looked around the area, and started painting. The main reason for doing this project was to get out of my comfort zone. Being a studio painter, it was a great challenge for me to paint on plein air, literally in the open air, without any great plan beforehand. Spontaneity being the key to this project, but not my strong suit artistically. After completing the title page, I prepped 33 canvases with orange acrylic ground, and then set out on this project. I started at the northwestern point of Prince Edward County at the Murray Canal, which links Lake Ontario with the Bay of Quinte. There's a swing bridge connecting Carrying Place and PEC to Trenton on the mainland. I woke up just before sunrise, allowing me ample time to have a quick coffee and properly wake up, eager to start this thing. But a quick look at the thermometer outside gave me the shivers, literally. Over the past few weeks, winter had made so many reappearances it would make Lieutenant Columbo blush. It was about 5 degrees outside at home when I left, and not much warmer when I arrived at my destination. I set up my gear and started sketching potential compositions while wearing gloves, no less. Here's the cool swing bridge which moves aside to let boats pass. Speaking of boats, there was a weird little information booth set up to look like a boat. I forgot to bring my stool, so I set up on the boat, which conveniently had a bench on deck. And this boat's kind of fun, actually. Here's a shot looking west. This was quite a beautiful location, and the pictures here, taken when I arrived, make it seem like it was warmer than it really was. People came and went all day, fishing, picnicking, frolicking. I'd driven past this area several times before, but it was never a destination in itself for me until that day. Here's a shot looking east. It got warmer by the afternoon, but I still kept popping back in the van to avoid the strong winds. Despite the challenges of the cold and the wind, I felt the first day was a success, with my first painting in the series done by about 4 p.m. And the forecast for the next day looked like it would be chilly also, so I thought maybe I'd start out a bit later, bring warmer clothes. When I loosely mapped out the 33 stops for this project, I tried to space them out somewhat evenly, planning to choose the specific locations on the day, but I started to get some vague ideas of my next stops as I drove back and forth each day. The first choice of the Murray Canal was obvious, since it was the westernmost end of Highway 33 in Prince Edward County, but I noticed the Carrying Place Cemetery and made a mental note to check it out for a possible location for day 2. So on my way out in the morning of day 2, I took note of the scenery between the Murray Canal and Taft Road, which was the general area of day 3, just in case something else caught my interest. I stopped by and I wasn't disappointed. There was another cemetery close to the canal, but this one had lots of grave marker diversity. So I parked on the grass, did some sketches, chose a composition, set up my painting gear, and got to work. It was much warmer that day, and although the wind was strong at times, it often sent me bursts of fragrance from the nearby lilac bushes. Also, I was briefly visited by a bunny who was just passing through, but it was too fast for me to get a picture. I finished this picture just before 2 p.m., happy with the result. I think day 2 went well. I was supposed to be somewhere near Taft Road on this day, but none of the scenery spoke to me, so I went further north up the road, perhaps a bit too close to the cemetery from the previous day, but the intersection of Highway 33 and Old Portage Road and County Road 64 looked pretty interesting, so I parked the van and checked out the area. I first walked across the street to have a look at the great sign for Westfall Memorial Park, then walked around to various buildings at the vicinity of the intersection. Despite its unintended prominence in this photo, I had absolutely zero interest in painting any sign with that county logo on it. Here's something that might one day turn into a painting. I really like chunky tech. I also like old Coke signs. Then I saw this convenience store with a pretty cool Coke sign, but the sun was behind it and the shop itself didn't have enough overall visual interest for me that day, so I moved on. I did meet the owner of the house, a retired school teacher who also ran the now closed village store with her husband. We had a nice chat about my project and the history of the house, which happens to be in the background of my final painting for this day. On day 4, my wife Krista decided to come with me. I said, you'd be bored, there's nothing much for you to do, I'm just going to be outside painting. And she said she'd come out, she has projects to work on. And I said, fine, I don't mind, but you're going to be bored. My rough plan had me at Smokes Point Road, and I ended up right at the intersection of that and Highway 33, which you can see here, after noticing an interesting old fence and gate. This spot also appealed to me practically, since there was ample flat ground off the shoulder for me to park and be safely out of traffic's way. The sky was cloudy and rain was forecast for the afternoon, but the van was perfectly parked to give me a view from inside the van that would be similar to my outdoor setup. Of course, it did start to rain, gently at first, so I went inside and painted for a bit. Around 11 a.m. we had lunch while chatting, and Krista was in the front passenger seat, and here I am in the middle of the van, comfortably painting here. It was nice hanging out. Krista managed to rest her eyes a bit with sunglasses on, listening to a podcast. During a moment when I was painting some fine details, Krista warned me that there was a truck approaching with flashing lights so that it wouldn't disturb my work. I looked up in time to see a rescue truck crossing the lanes, headed directly for us. I thought maybe somebody called it in, thinking we were stranded, not seeing me outside earlier, because I would have been hidden by the van to most drivers anyway. It turns out somebody did call it in, but they thought Krista was unconscious. I explained to the friendly rescue guy that there was no problem and that Krista was totally fine and I was just painting inside to avoid the rain. I also explained that I'd be on the road for the next month, gave him a 33 on 33 postcard, and asked him to pass on that info to the rest of the rescue folks. No problem. He went on his way. But just before he left, we were visited by an ambulance. Rescue guy explained to them, and then there was no problem. They went on their way too. Krista and I laughed about it for a bit, and I joked that she can't join me for the duration of the project if she plans on taking cat naps in the front seat. And she joked that it wasn't as boring as I had predicted. And then the cops came. 2 cars. Turns out the officer who talked to us was super nice and friendly and understood our explanations. He had to check our driver's licenses, I guess, in case there was a strange scenario where I had kidnapped Krista and forced her to sit in the front seat with access to an iPad and a cell phone while I sat in the back seat and painted a fence. It was pouring rain this morning when I left home, so I was prepared for a day of painting inside the van, but it stopped by the time I arrived, so I sat up outside and got going. My other plan for the day was having my old friend, singer-songwriter Jeff Jones, come out from Toronto and play some of his original songs while I painted, a getaway from the city for him, and some company and entertainment for me. When he arrived, we caught up, and then it started to rain, so we went for lunch at George's Fish and Chips, mentioned earlier, where we sat out the rain and returned to the hydro station for some music and painting. And here's the final painting for day 5. My original plan for this day was at Salem Road, but having noticed this interesting site over the past few days, I parked by what I thought was simply an old barn, which is now the county depot, selling grain and other farm supplies to farmers and locals alike. It turns out the barn was actually the old Consacon train stop dating back to the 1800s. Part of the now defunct railroad is now the Millennium Trail. The smaller building by the road used to be a weigh station where farmers would get weighed before getting a load of grain from a nearby grain elevator. And the attractive checkerboard pattern is a holdover from the days this place served the Purina Company. The current proprietor of the depot, Steve Gregg, came by to visit me at my easel when he arrived to open the shop and gave me some interesting historical info. For example, a local story has it that back in the 1920s, a nearby farmer took the train from there to Trenton to get married and immediately returned to continue working.